really, really trust your agent on what is it market price. And I'll see people come in too and they'll be like, well, I don't think this house is worth this. Let's offer $50,000 under.
It is pretty apparent sometimes in a competing situation where there may be other buyers offering on the same property that let's try for $30,000 under asking might not be a good choice.
Is it possible the seller might not then be interested in negotiating with you if you really love that house?
It's possible.
Welcome to Lawrence Real and Local, Keepin It Real podcast presented to you by the Lawrence Board of Realtors. We're your go-to source for all things real estate in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm Lexie Haskin with Flint Hills Mortgage.
And I'm Campbell Reagan with McGrew Real Estate. Together, we're here to make the journey to home ownership a breeze. Join us as we share insider insights, expert advice, and a dose of fun along the way.
Hello, everyone. Okay, this is kind of a different episode. Hello. Welcome to Lawrence Real and Local, Keepin It Real podcast by the Lawrence Board of Realtors. Ooh. There we go. Okay, I had to say that like 7 times on our last recording because I couldn't.
It was perfect.
So today's going to be a little bit different. We have our guest co-host here. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. And I'm actually going to be a guest today instead of one of the hosts. So it's just going to be a little mixer-oo, a little fun.
Mixing it up today.
Keeping you guys on your toes. But my name is Lexie Haskin with Flint Hills Mortgage.
And I'm Bailey Stuart with McGrew Real Estate.
And we are the guests today. So we're introducing the guests before the host. Patrick?
I'm Patrick Dittman with McGrew Real Estate. And we're going to see how me being in control of this goes. And I think it's going to be a huge benefit to everybody listening as far as that process, whether you're a first-time home buyer, you owned a house for 20 years or 20 years ago and you're ready to jump back into the game. So it should be a lot of fun. At
first, when you said, I think this is going to be a huge benefit, you were talking after you were hosting. I was going to be like, I'm not trying to get ready. No. It's going to be a great benefit for everyone here that I'm the host on this episode.
I didn't think of it that way, but you're exactly right.
I'm giving you a hard time, Patrick.
That's okay. Every day. If I make it through a day, it's positive. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this as far as what each of your roles are. If this is the first time anybody's been on here or looked at it and they're like, okay, well, we have a host that's a guest now. What do you do? And then as well as for Bailey.
So I guess I can go first. Again, I am working with Flint Hills Mortgage. I'm a loan officer. My background, I actually worked in title insurance for 3 years and then moved over to the mortgage industry. And I've been here for 4 years now. And my role in the loan process is just educating buyers on the process, helping them figure out what they qualify for and getting them to the finish line. I guess that's just in a nutshell. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into the loan process, but one of my big things is I love educating people. A lot of people don't realize or they're too scared to ask questions and they don't know what to ask. And that's why I was really excited to be on this podcast episode too, not even just as a host, but to answer some of those questions. But yeah, I'm just the loan girl.
Yeah, no, everything Lexie said is on point. It's wonderful to reach people with the education before we're sitting down at the table the very first time. A lot of information to first-time home buyers can be like drinking from a fire hose. Mm-hmm. There's so much info, so many words and terminology that they may have not heard before. So having sessions like this, having education classes and just kind of breaking the ice on the process, the timeline, things to look into ahead of time just makes everything a little less stressful and run smoother. I work with both buyers and sellers as a real estate agent. So today, we're going to be focusing on first-time home buyers and things that they can do ahead of time.
And not only that, you're going to be the president of the LBOR in 2025.
I am. This last year flew by. So yeah, next year will be a busy, fun year.
Wow. We're just lucky to have you here. You're busy all over.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here. Like I said, this is a really great topic for people to get a head start on.
Yeah.
So for me, my personality is before I ever talk to somebody about anything, first I want to do my upfront research. So I kind of feel like this is an opportunity to do some upfront research. I'm a big YouTube guy anyway, so if
You're a
I learn about
YouTuber?
something, I mean, I don't spend a lot of time, but before I make any purchase, I'm on YouTube or I'm on Google and I'm looking at like it doesn't matter whether it's a TV. If it was a home buying process, I would do plenty of research, but I would probably get a lot of different information as far as where I would start and where what that looks like. And when we're talking about Lawrence, Douglas County, the area just right outside of there, what would be a starting point for somebody who has questions, doesn't really know what that process looks like, doesn't really want to drink from the fire hose, or doesn't want to feel overwhelmed and lock up? So where might they start?
Yeah, I can start with that. I think first and foremost, it's beneficial to enlist the help of a buyer's agent. Before you start watching videos or reading articles that could be from different states that have different real estate laws. So, I mean, whether you're getting recommendations from friends or family or coworkers, or you're reading reviews online to try to find a buyer's agent that you are interested in talking to, set up that initial meeting, whether you're interested in purchasing a house this year or not, and it's something out further in your future. Having those conversations early and starting to talk about the process and the terminology is beneficial. Kansas, Patrick, you absolutely nailed it, that location, state specific matters. And Kansas, for example, doesn't allow dual agency. So a listing agent working for the seller cannot represent the buyer as well. So it's beneficial to have your own representation, your own agent advocating for you. So that's my first step is find a buyer's agent, set up a meeting, and actually I recommend interviewing multiple agents. It's a partnership, and it needs to feel comfortable, and you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you, and it's a big transaction, and it should be a good, comfortable partnership.
Yeah, just working with someone that you trust. Yeah. And I mean, and just like interviewing an agent, also interviewing a lender as well. And just having somebody that you can have that partnership with, work side by side. Because, I mean, also talking with an agent, talking with a lender too. Because even if you're not ready to buy initially, it's just coming up with that financial plan. So knowing what you can qualify for, what is a comfortable monthly payment, where the market's currently sitting at. I mean, rates are changing each day, but also knowing what even goes into a monthly payment. So it's not just that principal and interest. I mean, you also have taxes, insurance, knowing what goes into closing costs, and just getting all of that figured out, knowing how much you need to save up for, if there's down payment assistance available, if you need that down payment assistance. I mean, there's just so many different moving parts, and just talking to someone, knowing what you need to get to that step. If you need credit repair, just so many different things.
So does it matter which one I start with? Do I start with the buyer's agent? Do I start with the lender? Does it necessarily matter? Or is it just I'm probably going to need both at some point?
My opinion is it doesn't matter which one's first, but they should both be very close together. I've had clients show up with a pre-approval in hand from a local lender, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful that they are proactive and they've already taken that step. I also prefer sometimes to meet with, new clients, have this discussion. I recommend local lenders and educate them on the benefits of working with a local lender that knows our area and our market. So in that situation, they would see me first.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I agreed, just hand in hand, at least close together, because either way, if you are going through this initial step, you probably should meet with somebody with financing for sure. Just know if you can't even qualify for a home, and then how to get there. So, yeah.
So let's go through this process and we can walk through it. Let's start with I am qualified now. I've selected my agent that I want to help me buy this house or buy a house. What's next now? What are we doing? Are we just running out and looking at houses, or is there a process to that?
Well, depending if we've had our initial buyer consultation, is what I call it, we go over the process at that point, what it's like to schedule a showing, what I need the client to convey to me, what I send them to review most of the time prior to the showing, disclosures or any information on the property. And then, there's different showing instructions for different properties. Some are extremely easy to see. Some require a little time. Those are the types of things we talk about when we first meet, of what it's like when we get the ball rolling.
And in order to be shown a house, you do need to have that pre-approval or pre-qualification, correct?
Oftentimes, yeah. And
because you can't even make an offer without that.
Right. Even if it isn't, a requirement to cross the threshold of the door with your pre-approval, if it ends up being the one, I've seen it unfortunately happen where buyers, they're behind the ball and there's another person interested in that house and they're ready. So they get an offer in that night with their pre-approval while you're, trying to catch up and get stuff to a lender.
Yeah.
And then ultimately end up losing the house potentially.
And just kind of touching on the pre-approvals and pre-qualifications too. I mean, there is a difference between the two of them, but I mean, at least having that letter in hand really helps because it shows that you have talked to someone. But with a pre-qualification, they're just going off of the information that you've given the lender. So, I mean, they just go off of that bare bone application. The pre-approval has a little bit more depth to it. You've provided those income documents. You've shown them the bank statements. And they know that you are qualified. You do have that approval to move forward instead of just going kind of off those verbal information. And that's always really handy when you have all of that information ready for the lender when you're talking to them too, just to make sure that you are a strong buyer. And then even if you are making an offer, the lender could even call that listing agent and say, hey, this is a strong buyer. And actually hearing that from that lender, having somebody that will do that partnership and actually take that extra step for you too, and knowing that you have that partnership. But I mean, a pre-approval gives it that buyer the clear understanding of the budget, helps them focus in on what they should even be looking at and what's comfortable for them. And it also tells the agent and the seller that this is a serious buyer. So that just shows that you are taking those steps, you are prepared, and you're serious about the process.
As far as loans, types, and options, I know people think about terms as far as like, how many years is this loan for? What's my interest rate going to be? What's my monthly payment going to be? How's that really play a role with the different types of loans that somebody might qualify for? So
interest rates, there were a lot of different parts to your question.
I know I'm giving you questions so that you can answer.
I can just go. So interest rates are given by a ton of different things. So I mean, it goes off of credit score, the loan amount that you have, the loan program that you have, the amount down that you're putting. So I mean, a lot of times when people are looking at those interest rates, they are just getting what's marketed to them necessarily. So when you ask a lender, hey, what's the interest rate today? It's like, okay, I can tell you what the market rate is, but again, what's your credit score? How much down are you going to put? Are you a first-time home buyer? I mean, there's different loan level pricing adjustments that go into it as well. And it's just a very personalized thing. And so interest rates are a different thing, and it changes from day to day as well. And then the loan program, again, can affect that interest rate. And then the credit score can also affect what program that you qualify for. Right now, which is the end of 2024, government loans that have lower interest rates than conventional loans do right now. So I know by saying that too, I mean, this will be coming out in 2025. So, I mean, it could be completely different at this point. But also looking at affordability, if somebody wants to look at a certain price range and they need that lower interest rate, to have that lower monthly payment, sometimes we do have to look at an FHA loan because it just is a more affordable monthly payment with that lower interest rate versus a conventional. And a lot of times people are afraid to do the FHA loans because they think, oh, it's a government loan. It's a lot harder. We might not be able to get through the appraisal, might have this, that, whatever. But in reality, they could be a really strong buyer, but they just need that lower interest rate for that lower monthly payment as well. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different things that you can talk about with those loan programs. And each program has a really, really great opportunity for first-time home buyers. So with conventional loans, you can go down to 3% down. And then FHA was also targeted towards first-time home buyers or people with lower credit because you can do 3.5% down. So, I mean, you don't have to put down 20% or even 10% or even 5%. I mean, if you aren't a first-time home buyer, conventional is 5%. But yeah, you can go down to as low as 3%, FHA 3.5%, and those options really help with affordability.
I've heard of grants.
Mm-hmm.
What's that mean?
So there's grants, and then there's also down payment assistance options. Sometimes with these grants, they are still repayable after a certain amount of time. So if you are talking to different banks, sometimes there are grants that are just for banks. Sometimes brokers, which is what I am, we can access some of those grants as well. But most of the time, they can be placed on the property as a second lien. So you'll have your first mortgage, and then it'd be like a second mortgage. Sometimes they accrue interest, sometimes they don't. There are some programs that you can pay back right when the mortgage is sold, whether it's refinancing or being purchased. Sometimes they'll fall off after 10, 15 years. Sometimes you can make an additional payment. Sometimes it can be considered free money. And it just talking to your lender and figuring out, will this be an extra payment? Is this accruing interest? If we aren't making payments on it, will I have to pay this back at some point? Or when will this become due? I mean, there are a lot of different questions that go into it. And a lot of times things aren't 100% free, even if people think they are, but it is a really good option to have in order to even get into that house and be building that equity and that generational wealth that people can get from buying a house and investing in real estate, investing in yourself, not paying your landlord's mortgage. Even if eventually you turn into that landlord and having somebody help pay for that. So, I mean, it's just a really great way to be able to access to get to that next step as well. But just being able to figure out everything that goes into it.
Awesome. All right, Bailey. Does it matter if I bought 20 years ago and now I'm ready to jump back in the game here? Have things changed?
Things have changed. Yep, 20 years ago was around the time that buyer agency was even becoming a thing. And so I've dealt with multiple clients in the last year or two that were in that situation. And so once again, even though they've owned 2 or 3 properties in their life, a lot of the terms I was using and a lot of the process is new information. So it's beneficial to have that conversation early and get the ball rolling. And I did want to say, great info on the loan process, different types of products. That is 100% your area, not mine. But I share with clients all the time that having the conversation with the lender early, learning and exploring the different options. It's not all black and white. This loan, this down payment. It is. It's sometimes beneficial to just keep the insurance fee and save some cash back. Sometimes it's beneficial to pull money from investments rather than having a lower down payment. So, I mean, there's a lot of options. It just has to be discussed and customized for the buyer.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say too, right now, the market is very interest rate focused. And I'm going to say this right now, interest rate isn't everything. It really isn't. I mean, having that partner that can help you figure out, how can I save some money? I don't want to put down necessarily all of my savings. I mean, I need some emergency things back as well. I mean, how can I make it work for me? And it's about being strategic as well. So also kind of bouncing off of the 20-year thing that Patrick was saying, it is different in mortgages as well. I have not been in it for 20 years, but there are a lot more papers that have to be signed at the closing table. I have worked with people that have purchased houses 20 years ago, and they're like, why do I have so much paperwork to sign? My hand's getting tired. I'm like, well, 2008 happened, and there are protections put in place, not just for me, but for you. So there is a lot more paperwork, a lot more background stuff that is happening. Way more documents that are required to even get a mortgage, because we just want to make sure that you are able to afford it and that it's just a sound financial thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
A really great agent once referred to it as a financial colonoscopy.
Okay.
is the approval process, and I think that's a really great way to describe it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We have different phases as we go, and I want to touch on those before we run out of time. Okay, we're buying a house. So, Bailey, how many houses? Let's pretend we looked at 20 houses. Is that too many? Is that just right? It's where are we at on that? And then let's talk about when I find the right house, I want to buy it. What am I going to do here? And what's that process look like?
So there's no set rule on how many houses first-time homebuyers or any homebuyer looks at. It literally could be the first one you see, or you could see 20 or more. As a rule of thumb, I would say 5 to 10 is probably a pretty solid average of homes that people view before they find the one and decide on the one. But like I said, it could easily be north of 10 and get closer to 20 or more. I recommend that buyers pop into open houses when they can. If they're slightly interested in the house and they don't feel like scheduling a showing with me, the more showings you have, the more open houses you view, the more comfortable and ready you're going to feel when you do find the one that you want to make that you want to make an offer on. It just doesn't feel as new. So when you do find the one, hopefully we've had previous conversations about the general parts of a purchase contract, so they're not hearing some of the inspection options or the term earnest money for the first time. But what we do is we either meet in person or over the phone, and we build the offer together. I really stress to people that a good offer is an entire package. It's not just the price. There's many pieces of the puzzle that make a good offer package, and some have a lot more weight than others. Price is a huge one.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of little pieces that make an offer stronger, and we go over each of those and find what's strong and comfortable for them.
I also want to say, really, really trust your agent on what is it market price, because I'll see people come in too and they'll be like, well, I don't think this house is worth this. Let's offer $50,000 under. It's like, but usually when the realtor is going in, they have those comps. They know what is actually market price, so what it's actually worth. And when making those offers too, you guys can definitely tell them, hey, this probably won't be accepted and probably isn't the best offer, but okay. But just trusting your agent too when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. The housing market is completely dynamic. It's constantly moving, constantly changing. There is no black and white, that house is worth X amount. The value is what two parties agree at that given moment that property is worth. But it is pretty apparent sometimes in a competing situation where there may be other buyers offering on the same property, just based on experience, based on market research data, being a full-time agent and seeing so many houses in person, that let's try for $30,000 under asking might not be a good choice if you're truly trying to win the house.
Yeah.
Is it possible the seller might not then be interested in negotiating with you if you really love that house?
It's possible. Yep.
Okay, so we found the house, we put together the offer, and it was accepted. Do I get to do inspections on this thing?
Depending on how the offer was written and the terms, which we would discuss ahead of time and know before making the offer.
What might that look like? Like if inspections were an option for me?
So like I said, depending on which route we went with inspections, that time period would start the very next day. And let's say it's 10 calendar days. The buyer and I immediately, or we already have discussed, which inspector they're interested in working with. And we get it scheduled immediately. And if that's a few days out, then we meet the inspector there, go through everything. At the end of the inspection, they take us through a tour of the house with everything that they are going to include in the report. We get the report a day or two later. It's detailed. It's extensive. We have a lot of good inspectors in our area. And the buyer and I review, discuss, and determine if there are deficiencies that they're uncomfortable accepting. And where we go from there depends on how we wrote the offer, whether they're canceling the contract and moving on to the next house, or they're negotiating with the seller for those repairs.
And even if they do decide to waive inspections, they can still do inspections, correct? But they just won't be able to cancel the contract if it comes back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And waiving inspections has been more common in the last few years just with the sheer competitiveness of buyers. But what I always remind people is it's not an all or nothing thing.
Yeah.
And really the time when waiving inspections comes into play is when you're competing with other buyers. And, there could be situations where you aren't concerned with the HVAC system because it's 6 months old, but you want to check out the roof and the foundation, or anything like that. So it's completely customizable when we're making the offer or negotiating the offer. But if a buyer chooses to waive inspections, they can absolutely do them for their own knowledge, just to know what to address when they move in.
Yeah.
Are there things that the lender requires? Or is it just inspections and I'm in good shape? I know I turned in my paperwork to you though, but what else are you going to do for me?
Well, I will say too, depending on the type of loan, some inspections are required. So, for example, VA termite is required, and the buyer cannot pay for that as well. And then also, so we will have the appraisal done. So appraisal is required on pretty much every loan. I mean, every once in a while we'll see an appraisal waiver, but those aren't very common. So with the appraisal, it can come back and basically we're just trying to see if the property meets the value that it's being purchased for. And if the appraisal comes back low, then we might need to do some negotiations from there. And the buyer would be responsible for bringing it in the amount that's different from the sales price, unless you guys can negotiate something where maybe you meet halfway, or maybe you can negotiate it down to the appraised value. But we are just looking to see if the value is actually there. Sometimes the appraisal will come back, depending on the type of loan, that we do need repairs. So, for example, FHA, maybe there's wood rot, or something's going on with the foundation, or there's exposed wires. I mean, we get into safety issues there, and those do need to be addressed.
All right. We got through the appraisal. We got through inspections. Maybe a couple of things got repaired. I'm cruising to the finish line here, right? We feeling good?
We're feeling good.
Am I ever going to hear from you again?
Absolutely.
I mean, throughout this process, you definitely are working with people that you hopefully you trust, and you become friends, fingers crossed, throughout the process. I mean, we aren't strangers at the end. You should be comfortable with us, that we aren't just going to leave you high and dry. I mean, not trying to put words in your mouth, Bailey.
No, I fully agree. To kind of step back just a little bit, like Patrick said, the offer is accepted. Okay, what's next? My next step is I immediately send the signed accepted offer to the lender.
Yeah.
And that is when the rate is locked, correct? Yep.
Sometimes people choose to float it, but most of the time we do go ahead and just get those terms locked in. And depending on the lender too, you might be able to lock it in and float down the rate if it does change quite significantly, but that could be something you talk to your lender about. Not everybody offers that.
And at that point, generally, buyers have 5 days to start their formal loan application with the lender. So that's the colonoscopy part.
Yeah.
Different than the pre-approval, which is pretty simple. I mean, it's a few hours or half a day.
Yeah.
So once the offer is accepted and the lender has the contract, that's when the real part starts, the real application. Simultaneously, that's when our inspection period generally starts. Title company is getting the contract and starting their part, their title search. So the transaction overall has multiple moving parts that are all happening simultaneously. And I stay in the center of all of those and manage communication between everybody and, adhering to deadlines of the offer. So we talk the whole time.
Yeah.
And we talk after closing.
Yeah.
We stay in touch with people and help.
And when you work with a local agent and a local lender, a lot of times we know each other. So we know who we work well with. We know how to work with each other too. So that is also something that is very helpful throughout the transaction too, is that knowing that you have partners that know how to work with each other, can communicate well together. I mean, that definitely does help too.
Are familiar with the market.
Yeah, familiar with the market. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just all the different things. Also, we didn't really touch on this, but documents that you will need. If you are a W-2 earner, we need your 2 years W-2s, 30 days most recent pay stubs, 2 months bank statements. I mean, those are just the bare bones of what you need to move forward. Then you can ask your realtor or your lender for homeowners insurance agents recommendations, or just go search for them on your own, but you will need that as well. And then if you are self-employed, you would need 2 years tax returns, and then retired Social Security, we'll need those tax returns, 1099s, Social Security award letter. I mean, just ask what you need, but those are some common documents that you will need just to get through the mortgage process.
And it seems like a lot, but these documents are in place. These guidelines, regulations are in place to protect home buyers.
Yeah.
To ensure that, and the lender, but to ensure that it's a smart purchase to move forward with.
Yeah. And I mean, it really does not just protect us, like Bailey said. Yeah, it protects you. Yeah.
What a wealth of information. It really has been really great.
Yeah.
What am I missing? What are we missing? Anything, any takeaways?
Well, I wrote down some mistakes people
Okay.
make. So not getting pre-approved before house hunting. Mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, overextending your budget.
I've got very similar things.
Overextending your budget. 3, failing to shop around. And I mean, just talking to somebody, shopping around, not necessarily even just for rate or monthly payment, but just making sure that you're working with somebody that you trust. I mean, talking to multiple people, trusting your gut. Mistake 4, underestimating the closing costs and ongoing homeownership expenses. People don't understand all the closing costs, what goes into it. Yes, there's going to be inspection fees. People don't think about that. Maybe even figure out maybe what utilities are like for that area. If there's an HOA that they have to pay for, and those dues, different things like that. And then mistake number 5, making large financial changes during the process. Please do not quit your job. Please do not go buy a car or open any other random lines of credit. Please do not make extremely large purchases or deposit your mattress money into your bank account. So please do not do that. We have to be able to source that. Those are some big mistakes that people make throughout the process. So please avoid those. Please.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that mistake number 1, not having a pre-approval first. whether you have the actual document or not, having the conversation with the lender and getting a general idea of what you would be approved for and what you could afford, because those sometimes don't align. Sometimes people are approved for far more than they're comfortable paying every month. And that range gives us a starting place as a team, a lender, buyer, agent team, to see what's out there that fits your budget. And if it's not time to start looking now, we can work towards a plan and a financial kind of timeline for when you're ready. Maybe you have a lease in place because you haven't owned yet, so you're renting and you're not going to want to buy until next spring. Just the conversations early help.
Yeah, creating those budgets and everything. I will say a good tip or trick: if you're renting and you figured out that house payment, you don't necessarily have the down payment yet, pay your rent and then pay the difference of what that house payment would be into your savings account.
Oh, that's smart.
So then that way you get used to actually paying that house payment early, and then you're also putting that money into savings to help save for that down payment.
Mm-hmm.
That's
that
what
is
I
a good
did.
Tip.
Good, clever idea.
I have a couple of those in the back of
That's
my
cool.
head.
That's good.
But you have any other questions for us, Patrick?
I'm going to take off the host. I'm going to pass it back to you. I have a lot of questions, but I don't think we would be done anytime soon.
Anytime.
So
we can just table it for maybe another episode.
well, I think this is I know I'm going to get my ducks in a row as a buyer.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to do a little research, but I also know, what I just read on the internet is more so may not be what Lawrence is or the area is. And so I need to touch base with people that live and work here.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's something I was thinking about a minute ago, circling back to how we started, is
look at my notes to make sure I didn't forget anything.
going online and, looking at those kind of pre-populated estimated mortgage payments. I mean, there's, as Lexie said, there's so many pieces that go into even what the rate is.
Yeah.
So let alone loan type. So I wouldn't even say start there as a really general starting place. I would just ignore those and call a local lender and visit.
Yeah. Having somebody that you can actually talk to. Somebody that returns your phone calls.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
But okay.
Perfect.
Well, I think that this is a great episode. Thank you, Bailey, for joining us. Thank you, Lexie, for being a guest. Thank you, Patrick, for being
You know what? This was awesome. It was helpful.
And thank you to Lawrence Public Library for letting us use this space. We're very, very thankful that we have this even available to us.
Yeah, this is my first time here, and this whole setup is awesome.
Isn't it amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Love the color scheme.
Well, okay, I guess signing off. Okay, Patrick, hit the button.
Bam.
Thanks for joining us on Lawrence Real and Local, Keepin It Real podcast. We appreciate our guests taking the time to join us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you've enjoyed today's episode.
For more information, please visit us on the web at www.lawrencerealtor.com. And remember, whether you are buying, selling, or simply dreaming of your future home, we're here to help. Until next time, keep it real
And happy house hunting.